one thing that strikes me in terms of a lot of the conversations at AMRE this year have been about cyber and fears of companies being under attack from technological sources of one kind or another. There's a different kind of criminality that operates within business that often gets unreported, either by the business themselves or just stays beneath the radar, and that's sort of fraud, really, white-collar fraud committed by members of staff. And how do you see that manifesting itself within business in France?
Well, absolutely, completely agree with you. I mean, cyber tends to be a very popular topic at the moment, and we hear a lot, of things said about these new covers. There's a risk that's always been there and tends to be a bit overlooked. It's definitely fraud, and it's crime, generally speaking, whether external or internal. There were surveys showing that one out of two companies, on a given year, was going to sustain such a loss, So it's definitely something that we are willing to cover, and we think companies should have a closer look at, to be honest. And it's often staying under the radar because we hear from clients that's not something that happens within our company.
Of course. Until it does.
Exactly, until it does. And then, once it happens, that's not something that people are very willing to disclose, outside of their own company. So, but it's a key risk, certainly, yeah.
So when you do work with the company and you're looking to operate cover for this, how do you go about that within the business? How do you make sure that they're doing everything they can to limit, of course, their own exposure before even cover kicks in?
Well, there's that's our own internal technique. Let's say that's our underwriting criteria. I mean, obviously the location is quite important. Where this entity, this company has subsidiaries, and the internal controls that are in place and the claim history are the three key factors that we look into. Like other insurance companies, basically. Yeah.
And in terms of trends, is it criminal gangs that are operating these schemes, or is it mainly lone individuals who are doing it, perhaps working in accounts, unchecked, unregulated, don't go on holiday too much?
Yeah, these sort of things. Pretty much both. It's, to be honest, there's nothing really new. If the fact that you have some gangs in some new areas, there are some areas in Africa and in Asia with people very organized. You have the typical CEO fraud, which happened to some of our clients, these gangs tend to be quite well organized. But you also have like the rogue accountant in the company that embezzles some money as well.
Are there certain types of business that are more vulnerable than others, or is it really universal, the threat?
It's quite universal. To be honest. It ranges from small commercial companies, and sometimes the amounts that are stolen are very surprising, because they can be quite significant even in small structures.
Okay. Now, fraud's just one element, I guess, that's not so much an emerging risk, but it's a present one that doesn't always get that much coverage. But you're looking at different emerging areas and other risks that are on the horizon and working with business on that. Can you explain a little bit more about what Torus is doing on that?
Yeah, so I think one of the strengths that Torus has compared to maybe some other structures is being quite recent and new. We are able to react quite quickly to new emerging risks. And one field I have in mind, it's another example of risks that always existed. It's the field of professional indemnity. We've always provided solutions in professional indemnity, but with the technological expansion, you see some new jobs arriving, coming, some new exposures. You also have some regulatory changes in some jurisdictions, and we have been and we are able to provide solutions quite quickly and efficiently in different jurisdictions and for new activities, definitely.
And within France itself, are there any sort of specific emerging risks that you or trends that you're seeing here that you're having to do, perhaps work in a slightly different way to other countries?
France, I mean, each country, Torus tends to be very, to act as locally as possible. So that's why it's very important for us to be present locally. So we've got branches in quite a number of countries in Europe. France is, we've got, some specific deals to France that we don't have elsewhere, like we have some partners that sell some professional indemnity products for well-being professionals, for example, in France. Now, to risks that are particularly emerging in France, I think IT is a risk that needs quite some servicing, because the service industry is certainly growing, and the number of independent IT professionals or web designers or whatever is growing in France too. So yeah, certainly.